Welcome, everyone, to Saturday Night Sweat. I'm Tony Farmer. I'm here with David Baker, Mike Buckmiller, Nick Wellman. We have some other great guests coming up on the show later, too. We're going to react live to the Circus Survivor selection count for week 2. We're going to let you know where we landed with our picks and why. First, let's jump right into it. I want to start with you, David. You advanced last week in week 1 with the Broncos, Cardinals, and Jaguars. So, first of all, congratulations on that. Can you let us know where you landed and what is your reaction to this selection count that's hot off the presses now? We just learned about it a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on here both today and be a regular member of this show because Survivor is the most fun contest of the year. And, I have an entry in the Grandissimo and I've got, a bunch of entries in the main event. So, last week I decided to chalk it up a little bit with Denver. My strategy this week was I was kind of obviously we all start with the decision point of Baltimore, yes or no. I didn't want to completely fade them, but really it more came down to a decision of what I felt about the Cardinals and the Cowboys, because I thought those were the most two logical landing spots off of the Ravens. I kind of has reservations about both of them, to be honest with you. We ended up putting a little bit on the Cardinals, but we're under market on the Cardinals and completely faded the Cowboys. So I'm pretty happy to see that the Cardinals were 28%. The Ravens came in exactly where I thought they would be. They were 24. I projected 23, which I was lower than any projection model that I saw. Not that I have a model. I basically just project what I think. But everybody that I saw that did projections were between 27 and 32%. I thought it would come in lower than that. So I'm very happy with our exposure there. We've got 30% on the Ravens. My sleeper pick this week is the Steelers. I love the Steelers spot, and they really only have one logical spot in the future, and that's a bottleneck spot where everybody's going to filter towards them when they play the Browns at home. I think it's week 6. So I don't mind having burned a significant amount of my Steelers plays just because I never really want to be on a mediocre team at 40% owned, and I think that they could be that. So we did that, put a little bit on the Cardinals, filtered out a couple Rams, even though I'm a little scared of them, just wanted to diversify a little bit, and finished it off with 10% on the Houston Texans. I always like to have a couple contrarian plays in there just because if there's chaos up top. But really, it all came down to me was my first decision point was what do I think the Cowboys and Cardinals are regarding, with respect to market. And my initial thought was I really don't want to play teams that play the Giants, even though everybody looks at them as a really bad team. The way that I see upsets happening in the NFL is really good defensive lines can wreck mediocre offensive lines. And Dallas, as good as they looked on Thursday night, they still have a mediocre offensive line, and the Giants have a very good pass rush. So that's how you kind of wreck games and create upsets, is you create turnovers and sacks and negative plays. Now, the Giants could definitely get blown out of the gym because the Cowboys do have a prolific offense and the Giants won't play well from ahead. But I decided I don't like to spray and pray and just get a little bit of everything. I want to root for some results, and my result this week that I'll be rooting for is Cowboys to lose and make every entry worth a little bit more.
Great stuff there from you, David. Let's shift to Mike. Mike, I got to ask you, the Cardinals come in higher than the Ravens. Scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you that the Cardinals were the number 1 selection?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. First off, hey, thanks for hosting again. And ODB, David Baker on here. It's awesome. I love to listen to what he has to say. I love his brain. It's fantastic. So thanks for joining. I'm excited to be part of this pod. But to your point, to answer your question, that is, with my partner and I, and you'll get to listen to Russ later, we went back and forth on that because we know that the pool is getting sharper. We were worried a little bit about Baltimore and Arizona flip-flopping. With Baltimore's future value is just astronomical. And with Arizona, not many soft landing spots, maybe hosting Tennessee week 4, week 5. And so we knew that was always a possibility. We had Arizona. When we popped on our Twitter feed that was posted at 4 o'clock on the Survivor Sweat X handle, we had Arizona around 20%. They landed at 28. We had Baltimore 28-30. So those things flip-flopped on us. We had Dallas in between 15-18 and the Rams 10-12. They landed on 9. But we did say that we thought that those 4 teams alone would command anywhere between 75 to 80% of the pool, and they landed exactly on 80%. So any teams that you can take underneath those, you're coming in with some extreme value. There's a chance this pool can get chopped in a big way this week. Odds are, yeah, maybe not, but in order to get through 18,000 and change, you're going to have to be off some of these teams. We also faded Dallas, just like ODB. Our main 3 plays, the tranche of our plays were Cardinals, Lions, and 49ers we actually came in on. And I know it's very contrarian. I want to be on good teams when nobody else is on them. Yes, of course, it's Mac Jones. Purdy's out, Kittle's out. But for me, the most important thing was Trent Williams. And I listened to a press conference yesterday, and I follow a couple beat writers, and he's good to go. He's supposed to play tomorrow. And so I'm again fading Rattler, and I am looking to be on a good team, good defense. And, you know, I went in deep into the numbers, and Purdy is 2.5 points shift on the spread. And Mac Jones, just a few years back with a good coordinator, was a Pro Bowl player. Now, I'm not saying Mac Jones is one of the best quarterbacks in the league or by any stretch, but I believe in Shanahan. I believe in that, in his scheme. He's had a great week of practice. I guess he's quite the character in the locker room. And the word is that a lot of guys like playing around him. And so they're going to feed McCaffrey. As long as McCaffrey's there, Trent Williams is there, give me that defense, give me a bad team, but give me a low percentage of the pool and give me a chance to clip this thing. And so at the end of the day, I'm not happy that the Cards are the chalk, but again, I would rather be on them with less future value than to burn any Raven. And I'm just not a Cowboy believer. To Baker's point earlier, the Giants' defensive line, they were in that football game last week. They kept the team in the football game for the first half. Now, Washington's a good football team, but it's a division rival. Anything can happen. I think the Cowboys may pull it off, but I just didn't want to have the weight of our picks on the Cowboys. I don't like the Rams spot. And so we got a little cozy with Detroit and a little cozy with the Niners. And of course, we have plenty on the Cardinals.
Yeah, Mike, very sharp of you to point out Trent Williams while everybody's talking about Brock Purdy. 49ers are 44-25 when Trent Williams plays, 4-12 when he doesn't play. So nice work of you digging up that information from the press conference. My question here for you, Mike, you talk about like the Cowboys, you're not trusting them right now. They've got a couple softer spots later in the schedule when they're on the road. Do you think the Cowboys could be a team that you just never use in Circa Survivor, or do you think you'll eventually have to use them just in another spot later on down the road?
I think eventually they're probably one of the top. If we make it to the end, you're going to have to take 20 teams, and I think they're going to be in that tranche, in that top 20. Are they one of the better teams? Who knows? I don't think so. But yes, there are some spots to use them. They're also available in not only Thanksgiving, but Christmas. And as we know, the NFL turns over week to week, and injuries could, come into play. And then you weren't planning to take them because they're underdog. Currently, they're underdogs for both of those special weeks. But you and I know by the time you get there, they could be favorites.
So let me ask you this, Mike, because one thing that I like to consider is, okay, now that we've seen what the numbers came out, let's say we allowed you to reset your account and you could go back in and you could redistribute your picks. I'll just give you my answer while I give you a chance to think about it. But if I could go back and redistribute my picks, I would get rid of every Cardinal pick I have, and I would go ahead and I would divvy those up amongst the teams that I liked. I think everybody came in pretty close to where I thought, so I would probably just press my edge a little bit more with Baltimore. I do still want to stay off the Cowboys. And to your point, they are available on 2 holiday slates. Now, right now, they're projected like 35% win, but we don't know what the Chiefs or Commanders are going to be at that point. Yes, we all anticipate that these two teams are two of the better teams in the league, but they do play one of them at home, and both of them are extremely quarterback driven teams. If you had to list out the quarterbacks that if they were gone would have the greatest impact on the point spread, you would have Mahomes and Daniels as two of the top picks. So we're looking 12 to 14 weeks down the road. So having the Cowboys available for two different spots is very important. Also, I just want to say that if the Cowboys lose this week, we make up a lot of ground on the field. If the Cowboys win this week, then they may just be better than we thought, and there will be other opportunities where you can use them. So by looking at future value, they're also going ahead and putting in the fact that the Cowboys are a mediocre team. So if they're a mediocre team, I really don't want to lean into a 20% chalk. And the reason why I kind of wanted to fade the Cardinals altogether, we would have no Cardinals, honestly. My partner kind of convinced me to play a little Cardinals, but I'm okay. We came in underweight, and I'm fine to have that safety net. And if we lose them, that's fine. But I looked at the Cardinals, and preseason, I had the Cardinals as an 8-win team, and I had the Panthers as a 7-win team. So despite what we saw week 1, I don't have these two teams power rated that much different. Now, week 1, yes, the Panthers look like one of the worst teams in the NFL, but we all know that overreaction week 1 is something that can get you killed. And there was a lot of strange things that happened in that Jacksonville game. Also dealing with the fact that they traded Thielen and lost Coker near the very end of preseason. So they're still adjusting to the team that they have. And look, the Cardinals were one dropped pass away from going into overtime or having to fade a two-point conversion to even beat the Saints, who I think we widely think is one of, if not the worst team in the NFL. So I don't really feel warm and fuzzy about having anything at 28.6%. That is, a 500 team in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point,
the Panthers beat. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the Panthers beat the Cardinals last year. So to your point, but Mike, what is your answer to that question about what would you do differently now that you see the numbers if you had a magic wand?
Yeah, it's a great question. My text to my partner was, "Fuck, the Arizona Cardinals are the chalk," and so we completely faded Baltimore and the Bills with the future value. I think in order to win this, you have to have them in your pocket down the road. So to ODB's question is, I would distribute my picks on the other ones that I had. I would be a little bit more heavier on the Lions, Niners. I got a little Vikings too as well. So I would have dug a little bit deeper and found a couple spots, and I would have wanted to be under market if I knew they were the chalk. But here we are.
Mike, speaking of your partner, we should get him in here. Let's throw Mr. Russ Rosenblum here into the mix. That would be great. Let's see here. All right. He should be in here any second now.
I think I just joined.
There he is.
Russ.
All right.
Russ, you're live.
Russ.
If you saw where I was sitting, actually, you'd understand. I figured this was the best background I could come up with. That, or I guess, something with a Cardinals and like a giant chalkboard. Yeah, no, I mean, and I was able to hear what you said, and David, I couldn't agree with you more. Of course, if we could go back and we see what this is going to be, you're right. It's not even a spot I think I keep, 2 Cardinals. Like I just dump them all, right? We had a long debate about where we thought people would pivot that wanted to hold Baltimore, right? And the Cardinals are the obvious choice. And then you start moving down to Dallas again. And so we also chose to fade Dallas. But, you're then looking at, you're going to take teams like the Rams or like, where do you want to be here? And that was it was definitely a tricky spot with us. We did think that you'd have more people on Baltimore than there were. So I give you kudos, David, for nailing those numbers. You were pretty tight there. Now that said, in Grandissimo, where we're controlling 2 entries, we did go the other direction with the Lions, even though they obviously have value later, special weeks, etc. But we decided, look, we could end up taking. First, you don't know Grandissimo gets there to the special weeks. I actually think it will, but we don't know for certain that it will. So being able to use one of the teams now, certainly, it has some value if you can use a team like the Lions when other people aren't using them. If it turns out the Lions aren't as good as people think they are and they lose, well, it's bad for us they lose, but then what are you holding them for also? Similar example you made with Dallas. And we went through that same rigmarole with Dallas that we had to fade one of them. We also chose to fade Dallas and the Bills. We decided not to use the Bills here either. Now, Mike, I don't want to say he convinced me. I mean, he made a good, compelling case, and we talked about the Niners for quite a while before we pulled the trigger on that pick, both in the main pool and in Grandissimo. And it's one of those, I mean, they could bust this week very easily, but you're not necessarily playing to make it to next week, right? I mean, you're playing to try to win the pool. The Niners oddly don't have a lot of great games anyway. And certainly until Purdy comes back, who knows? So being able to maybe sneak through with the Niners here and, maybe you get lucky and you get the, Ravens, Cardinals, Cowboys all lose. And we're sitting there with Lions and Niners. I mean, you really, Grandissimo could get thin quick. Probably not, but it's not impossible.
Russ, the Bills came in at 2.4%. That was lower than I thought. I know you said you didn't want to touch the Bills. If you knew that it was going to be that low, would that interest you in the Bills, or do you just think they're a team that could lose outright and you don't want any piece of them at all, no matter what?
Mike might say no, he's nodding his head. If I knew they're coming in at 2.4%, I'm going to have some interest in them. We're not going to be, breaking them at zero. But, I might look to be, for example, if I know they're at 2.4%, maybe I'm saying let's take 10% Bills. I'm not taking 40% Bills, right? But maybe you take 5%, 10%. I want to be over the field. I'm annoyed with the Cardinals spot because we end up being fairly close to indifferent whether they win or lose. You got like a third of the field and we've got like a third of our picks. Not exactly, but it's close enough. And that always annoys me. I'd rather know that I'm ahead. Like maybe I'm at 40% and the field's at 30, or I'm at 20% and the field's at 30. Being totally indifferent. When I'm totally indifferent and I have 5% of my picks on them, whatever. But when I'm indifferent and it's our primary pick, that's annoying. So, that said, I'm somewhat indifferent. And the Cardinals have a couple of spots they're usable later, but not a ton. But yeah, no question annoying. But I do agree with everything you said about the Cowboys. And yes, if I knew the Bills had 2%, but the Bills have a lot of value moving forward. And to your point, David, about which teams are quarterback driven, you're not wrong. And Mahomes, I think, is clearly number one. I mean, without him, I'm not really sure what that team, when he has a bad game, they can't win. Right. He really is dominant there. But the reality is a much bigger drop off for Kansas City. But I don't know how competitive Dallas is at this point without Dak. Like, I don't know. Almost any team that's competitive in the NFL now usually has a good quarterback. The one exception, we talked about this, was last year. Pittsburgh really, assuming they're both healthy last year, if any one of them dropped out, I don't think they lose much. It was unclear who even should be the starter, but that's rare.
Russ, talk to me about where you guys landed for Grandissimo and why.
I think Mike had too much tequila and hit the 49er button. So that's no. So as I alluded to, we had, we looked at the Lions and the thought was to save them. But the reality is we took the Cardinals in one spot last week and we kicked ourselves for taking the Broncos because we really felt like we knew better. Like I knew the Broncos, you're going to have to end up with a higher percentage of the field there than you would in the main because it's implicit. In the main, you're going to have a bunch of people that have 2 entries, 5 entries, 20 entries, right? They're not going to lay the wood, and some might, but for the most part, they're not going to all take 20 entries on the Broncos last week, right? But if you're in Grandissimo when most people have 1 entry, then yeah, they're going to go take the one team they really like, right? They can't just take 60% of them. When you have 1 entry, you can't take 0.6 on the Broncos. So we didn't want to repeat that mistake we weren't taking the Ravens anyway, but we did know the Cardinals in this spot could end up being fairly substantial. And so we know we're dodging the Cardinals and the Ravens. And so once you're dodging them, now you're looking down going, okay, well, do I want to take the Cowboys? Do I want to take the Lions? Do I want to take the Rams? Right? I mean, that's going to be, I'll call it your primary pick, right? And at that point, we're like, okay, well, why don't we take, if we're trying to avoid Ravens, Cardinals, Cowboys, why don't we take the team that we think is probably the best spot here in general? So we decided to take the Lions, despite the fact they had obviously they got, special week value. And then we decided to take the flyer, right? So we kicked around a lot whether we would take Arizona and the Lions, Arizona and the 49ers. And then at the end of the day, we said, well, why take Arizona at all? I remember one of my comments to Mike here that was it was counterintuitive, but we forced ourselves to go through the thought process. I said, this is a little screwed up. Our biggest pick in the main is Arizona. And we're not taking them at all in Grandissimo. And so he said, all right, so do you think we should take them? I go, I don't know, maybe we should take them, or maybe we should take less in the main, but we should at least address why it is we're looking at them differently, right? Because as David, it's the process, right? The result's what it is, right? But it's the process of how you got there. And, part of it is because we have more picks, obviously, in the main, but that's actually a smaller part of it. It's because more people only have one pick in Grandissimo. So when they only have one, it's going to be 100% of their picks are going to be on the Ravens, or 100% of their picks are going to be on the Cardinals. Those are going to be the two, we knew those would be the two big picks, right? So we don't want to be in a spot where now 50% of our picks are going to have to be on one of those because we have two, right? So I can't put 20. If I could have put 20% on the Cardinals and Grandissimo, I would do it. If we had 10 picks, I probably do put two there, maybe three. But I'm not going to put 50% of our picks there, right? So you are actually looking at these contests differently, and not just because you think the other people are smarter, just because fewer people have multiple entries. So you're going to end up more top heavy, and it's going to happen for many, many weeks. It's just inevitable. It's going to happen for many weeks.
Well, on the Cardinals, I think that there's a lot of things that you can really say about them. First of all, the main game that they have that's available is week 5. And that's at home versus Tennessee. So now that we haven't taken Arizona in the Grandissimo, I haven't, and I have a majority of Arizona left in the main, we'll be able to have a much better feel by the time Tennessee comes. If this is just a team that is going to be low owned and we can go ahead and play in a good spot, or it's a team that we could just not have to use, because in the Grandissimo, you might not have to use the Cardinals. So I wasn't as worried about that. And in the main pool, now that I've seen that 28% have taken it this week, 23% took last week. If you happen to get the right team that loses this week, let's say Dallas loses, the Rams lose, even the Lions, some things like that, that you might lose some other people who have Arizona. They might only be available for 25 or 30% of the pool, and then they become a really, really strong pick against Tennessee. So I think it's very interesting that we'll have a lot more information of what's available with the Cardinals at that point. So that's kind of why I just kind of wanted to play a wait and see with the Cardinals. And just one more thing before looks like the beautiful Rachel Arieh is ready to join us. But on the Niners, I do have to say that I do disagree, Mike, that I think they have a lot of future value. And I strongly considered them as well. I did take 2 contrarian plays with Pittsburgh and the Texans, and I considered the Texans. But I mean, the 49ers, because I did play them as a heavy play in our picks contest, because we do like them in this spot. But they play Carolina at home, they play Seattle, they play Arizona, they play Cleveland. So there are a lot of different spots that you can use them. It's not like a Pittsburgh or a team that's going to bottleneck on one particular week. I think there are like 6 spots we could use them. That's why I ultimately decided not to use them. And I decided to use a team like the Texans and the Steelers, because those are 2 teams that really only have 1 to 2 places that they're going to be 60%, and they'll just get completely bottlenecked, and you'll get 35 to 40% of the pool. And that's something that I think we all three, and we all just generally want to avoid. So that's kind of, that was kind of my feeling on the Niners, but I do like the spot. I think that you guys are going to get through there. And also, I think you will know what to root for in the Arizona game based on if Dallas is winning and the Rams are winning and the Baltimore's winning, then you just want to win. But if those guys lose, you might just want to lose because it's going to be a much larger percent of the pool is going to lose. When the Cardinals lose, like, they're not the only game going off at that time. You're not losing 28% of the pool. You might be losing 60% of the pool if Dallas and Baltimore are about to go down as well. So then you'll kind of know where you're rooting in that spot.
You're right. And you also have the aspect that when we add in the fact that we have the 2 Grandissimo entries, none of which have the Cardinals, right?
Right.
And so those, of course, have a lot of value. So in theory, we're probably rooting for them to lose anyway, even though we're par on the main pool, because there's going to be a lot of added value. And to your point, you could end up with a lot fewer of the percentage of the field in Arizona, but you do get the quirkiness, if you will. If Arizona does lose, well, then a higher percentage of the remaining field still has them.
Yeah, but that's fine. You're still in.
Of
so
course,
that's okay.
you have more equity, right? But you could end up with more people that can use them, but you got a bunch more equity when you're using them anyway.
Sure.
Real quick, fellas, before we get to Rachel, one word answer of the big favorites. Who is the most likely to lose in your mind? Start with David.
I mean, we faded Dallas, so I mean, I think that that's probably going to be unanimous across the board. I think we all think that Dallas is a live dog to lose. So, yeah, I mean, it's Dallas here.
Russ?
It's Dallas, but I can at least put in my hope. I'll give you more than one word. Last year the Raiders, who were not very good, went into Baltimore and managed to win a game. So I have hope.
There you go, Mike.
Yeah, and I just don't want to pile on the on the Cowboys at this point. So how about the Rams?
I like it. I like it. All right, very good. Rachel, Arieh, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. You were on last week. I had so many people contact me and say, who was that Rachel person on the show? She was hilarious. People really enjoyed hearing from you. Before we get to who you picked for this week, I think I'm more interested in how you went about your selection process this week, because that was so entertaining last week. Can you walk us through how you went through that process and landed wherever you did?
For sure. Well, I'm coming in again right after you guys all just shit all over the Cowboys, but I went with the Cowboys.
Do
for
you
a
also
couple
think they're the
reasons.
most likely to lose, or no?
No,
Wait.
no, they're gonna win. I'm telling you. I mean, on Twitter, like you said, you got some feedback. I got some feedback too, and I did hear a lot of people liked my metric of selection last week, so I kind of decided to stick with that. And shout out to Eric
Nice.
Haber on Twitter. He dubbed it the WSMD metric. So it's the who sucks more D metric. And that's kind of what I did. So the Dallas versus the Giants, right? Russell Wilson, like period. That's all I have to say. Russell Wilson. So Dak Prescott, I mean, is going to come in lower on that scale than Russell Wilson. But I also, again, don't want to go with the chalk pick. And of course, guess who did? Chalky Josh. He went with Arizona. And so, of course, I asked him first who he's going with, and that's who he's picking. So I'm definitely not going to pick that. And it's funny to see like so many people went with them, especially after what we talked about last week. Like, I'm a little disappointed in you guys. I said we can use him this week and we can't use him any other week. So very disappointed in you guys. But yeah, so I went with Dallas, and I actually have really high hopes, and I don't care that they're playing Christmas and Thanksgiving. I already checked out all those games. I just don't think that's going to be a factor. I don't think they're good enough to have them later, but I think they're good for right now. And I think it's going to pay off being different than everyone else as well. I actually don't know the percentage.
So you're not worried about the Cowboys? You're not worried about burning the Cowboys for the holidays? Is there a team that you've kind of got your eyes on for the holidays? Do you like the Eagles against the Bears? Do you like the Chiefs? I mean, how are you feeling about that holiday slate coming up? I think it's in the back of a lot of our minds.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have it all pulled up right in front of me. I don't really like the Chiefs this year, but I did see a Lions-Vikings game. I just saw a bunch of opportunity for as we see the season unfold, because it's so early. And I feel like this week was actually so hard to pick for some reason. And I know people say that all the time, but when you look over all the future games like that, as well as what's going on right now, and week one wasn't really telling, like there was no big upsets. We still don't really know the way teams are going to go, but I saw enough out there that I liked, that when it comes up, I think I'm going to be just fine. And just the Ravens are still there as well. So yeah, trying to save them.
I agree with this week being tough. I felt like this was one of the harder weeks to project where other people were going to land. Fellas, I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but I can't
David
remember
shouldn't
in the last
agree
couple
with you.
years
He
struggling
nailed
as much as I did.
I will say I did hit it pretty good, but I don't know. I've been very fortunate and I've had a pretty good feel for the market, but this one I second guess myself more than I normally do. I'm normally very, very convicted in what I think the market's going to do. And let's just say I did miss the Cardinals. I had them at 21% and they came in at 28. Mainly just because I figured since 23% already used them that there was only, there's only 77% that could use them. So if 28% did, we're looking at like, what is that, like 40 something percent of the available Cardinals selections all use them. So that's a very high percentage. So I was a little wrong on that, but I did kind of hit Baltimore and Dallas. And just to Rachel, I mean, the Cowboys are most likely going to win that game. I don't hate the Cowboys. I don't think any of us hate the Cowboys in this spot. It's just, I think Mike, Russ, and I all have the philosophy that we don't want to spray the board. When I see that, when people say, okay, well, I have 25% of the Ravens and I have 20% of the Cardinals and I have 11% of the Rams and I have 15% of the Cowboys and I have that, and you gain nothing when anything happens. Right. I want to have a stake in the game. So I just had to basically, I think we all just kind of have to decide which one are we going to fade. Ultimately, I wanted to fade the 2 through 5. I was very adamant that I wanted to fade the Cardinals, Cowboys, and Rams because my gut tells me that 2 of these 3 are going down. I think we're in for an upset Sunday, but we all have partnerships in this, and my partner loved those 2 teams, and I loved the Steelers, and he hated the Steelers, so it was kind of a give and take. It's like he was like, "I'll give you the Steelers, but you got to give me a little of these," and that's fine. But we ultimately ended up taking an under position on the Rams Lions and a complete out position on the Cowboys. A neutral position on the Ravens. And I do understand that the Ravens have a lot of future value, but basically just because you can use them any week, they're probably going to win, most of the games this week. But let's not pretend that they're going to be 12-point favorites every week. They're not. Like when you use them, they're going to be a lot less. This is the number one nut spot that you can have. The Browns are the worst team in the football league other than the Saints, and they're getting them at home after a pissed off game. So there is no better spot to use the Ravens. Now, obviously you can use them any spot. So, it is great to have them in your pocket, and we will have them in our pocket. We got them in our pocket for 70% of the games. Another thing I think that people missed in the projections is the Eagles were used like 10% last week, and you really can't use Eagles and Ravens on the same entry. If you do, you are committing absolute suicide for that entry. So I think people didn't forecast the fact that the Eagles were used, and they were also used a lot in Grandissimo. So you have to factor that into the Ravens projections, is the fact that the Eagles guys really can't use the Ravens. So that's kind of why I thought it was going to come in less than a lot of the projection sites out there that had the Ravens a lot higher.
Yeah, all great stuff. David,
Rachel, you heard David? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I have
Mike,
a bunch of feelings about David. David does a lot of research. David is very smart. But I will say, if you've been following him on Twitter lately, his picks haven't been doing so hot.
Shots fired.
I think sometimes you got to go more with the luck and what you're feeling in your gut than all the research to back it up, and I think that's what I have going for me. So
the intuition, Rachel, the intuition.
Yes, I'm just saying, take everything that ODB guy says with a grain of salt. He's great at those seniors tournaments, but we don't know about football this year.
Shots fired.
Touche.
My goodness. I have a question for all of y'all. I would like y'all to each answer this. What percentage of the field, if you had to guess, do you think is going to get knocked out last week? We saw a record low number get knocked out for week 1 last week. Is this the carnage week, or is it going to be another conservative week? Let's go ahead and start with you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that it is a carnage week. And to ODB's point, you take a stand with certain teams, you go underneath or over top of the market, and you want to work those games and try to be on the right side of them. If the Dallas and Rams go down, I mean, you can get close to 30% of the pool. If one of those big plays, Baltimore goes down, I mean, this thing can get chopped really quick. Last year, week 1, Baltimore lost to Kansas City on the opening night. They went back home, cozy team against the Raiders. Didn't work out real well. This is the NFL. Anything can happen. So at the end of the day, I want to be off those high percentage teams, and I want to find spots and take stands. And so this thing, you can see 30% go this week. The NFL is a crazy, crazy league, week in and week out. Last week, what was the lowest lowest percentage that was ever taken out in week one? The chalk could prevail this week, but we're positioned in hopes that it doesn't.
Rachel, Mike says maybe 30%. Are you going to Price is Right him and say 31%? What percent do you think is going to go out this week?
So I'm not great with percentages, if we're being honest. I want to know what percentage the Rams are, because I think the Rams are losing this week.
Ooh.
9%.
9%. So maybe I would say like around 20, maybe. I think it's going to be less than that. But I do think the Rams are losing. I think the Titans actually look pretty promising, minus some of the coaching stuff, but the defense looked really great. And I think that Ward has some good rhythm coming in. It's coming up. It's coming in hot. They're going to have a decent week, and the Rams are going down.
Russ, what's your number?
Well, I mean, you look at this, and it's really only a little better than 50%, I believe, that you're going to have both Baltimore and Arizona winning. Basically 80% and 70%. It's like 56% that they're both going to win. So if any one of those lose, you've already lost what? Minimum of 25-ish% of the field. So then you probably got, so that's half the time, and you're going to have some of these other teams that lose. I think Mike's number is pretty good, but I would Price is Right him. I would put the 31. Like, I think his number is pretty good, but I think there's a better than 50% chance that we're going to lose 35% of the field or so.
David, what's your number, brother?
I'm saying, I'm going to say 38%, but I'm like 38 to 42%. I think there's going to be some carnage. I think I think we're going to have multiple teams lose that are 7% or higher. I say at least two of those lose, and then you're always going to have some of the lower things. I do want to say that those of you who don't have the chalk and you have some contrarian plays, I know that the easy thing is if I could choose a magic wand, I would like Baltimore to lose. But really, if you could choose anything, you would much rather, if you don't have any of these teams, this isn't for you, Rachel, or for you guys who have Arizona, or Rachel has Dallas. But if you could wave a magic wand, you would much rather have Dallas lose or Arizona lose than Baltimore. The Baltimore entries, even though I have 30% of them, the Baltimore entries are worth less than the Arizona entry and the Dallas entry. So I know that, the easy thing is, I want to root for the biggest underdog to lose, but the Baltimore entries are not worth as much. So if everybody gets through this week, the Baltimore entry, if Baltimore wins and Arizona wins, you would much rather have used Arizona than Baltimore. So if you are going to use all your magic wish to sweat and root for somebody to lose, Baltimore's not the team that you're rooting for. Those entries, if you pick the team like the Steelers or the Vikings or, San Francisco or any of these other sub 5% teams, you really want to see the Cowboys or the Cardinals lose. Those are the entries that are going to be worth the most amount of money and have the best chance of chasing you down to the end. The Baltimore entries are already going to be up against it. Now, obviously, they're trading the fact that their entry is going to be worth less for the better chance that they're going to advance. And that's kind of the decision that we all make at this point every week is how much am I willing to forego future equity for current win percentage.
You make a good point there, David. Sorry, you make a good point because the reality is that the raw equities run pretty close between the two of them, Arizona and Baltimore, in terms of percentage that we're taking. But if Baltimore wins and Arizona loses, you basically have, if Arizona loses, you've got 75% of the field or something that'll have Baltimore left, right? If Baltimore loses, you got 100% of the field that has Baltimore left. And your equities are about the same otherwise, like your non-subjective equities, just the raw dollars. So you'd certainly rather fewer people had Baltimore left. So that's definitely a good point.
And to the point was when somebody made the comment, it was tough this week to make a pick. True survivor players, every week it's tough to make a pick because it's easy just to go, Ravens, they're the 12-point favorites. Let's take them. And then when they lose, you go, look at the upset. Look at I blew it, And so the fact is, everybody has a story when they lose Survivor, and they're comfortable telling the story of losing the 12-point favorite with Baltimore instead of finding a team that they can come underneath They have two chances to win this. Baltimore loses or Baltimore wins, to David's point, and now those tickets are worth less because you get to take Baltimore on a future date when nobody else can.
Can you guys talk to me about what Grandissimo has done to your week? Like already figuring out where you land in Survivor is like almost a full-time job. That's how I feel, at least. Now you add the Grandissimo piece. You have two different strategies happening at once. Talk to me about this. Is the first year that Grandissimo has existed. How has it changed things, if at all, for y'all?
Well, I mean, I will say, just because I love this show and I want to promote this show, I'm going to give one of the more common misconceptions I think are out there about the Grandissimo. And that is, everybody thinks there's less people in this, so you just want to pick the safe play because it's not going to last as long. When in reality, I think that is the exact opposite approach. Now, I say that being the one who's taken the biggest shock both weeks. But I do think that you should be looking for contrarian spots in Grandissimo. If the favorite loses in the Circus Survivor, let's say that it was the same team both weeks, because this is an odd week, but let's just say Baltimore was the favorite in both contests. If Baltimore loses and there's 5,000 people gone in Circus Survivor, well, you still have to beat 11,000 people, 12,000 people, and your chance of getting equity is very, very low. Now, if in the Grandissimo Baltimore loses, now you're down to 30 people or 25 people. Your chance of actually realizing equity, your real equity based on one improbable event happening, goes way up. But to your question, Tony, the main thing that I have is I have a lot more people that have pieces of the Grandissimo. So I have a lot more people depending on my pick. And so me convincing my partner, who we have a couple of other partners, but we make all the decisions of the 1Ks, me convincing him that it's Pittsburgh and that I'm going to take a -160 when there's a -500 out there, whatever, like, we're just costing ourselves. But for me to go and report back to the 20 or 25 people that have all taken a piece of me, a lot of them courtesy of Survivor Sweat, and say, hey, I went ahead and I put all of our eggs on the Pittsburgh, wagon, that's kind of like a tougher sell. So me kind of managing, to answer your question, the thing that Grandissimo has done to me is it's made me kind of look internally and try to decide, like, how much conviction do I have in the correct way to play this versus managing like the expectations of the people around you. And I have to commend, whether I agree with your plays on San Francisco or the Lions, I do have to credit Mike and Russ for sticking to the philosophy that they believe is the best way to play the Survivor contest. And that is to fade the most owned teams and try to find leverage spots. So props to you guys. I hope it works out for you this week. But I went chalky this week, and I hope one day soon, in the next week or two, I'll be able to take a low owned team. My main reason for not going low on this week in Grandissimo was just the fact that I just did not like the next three picks. And I couldn't quite get my partner, who's the biggest Seahawks fan this side of the Mississippi, to play Pittsburgh with me. So so I just convinced him we had to pump up our 1K exposure. But that's basically all my Grandissimo experience has kind of taught me.
Yeah, I want to check in with Nick because I'm on my phone, guys, so I can't see if our next guest is here or not. So I just want to check in there and see how that's going.
Yeah, Paulie should be here, but Rachel, do you have any closing thoughts for us, you think? Just contest wise, life wise, do you have a life, or do you want to just hang out with us?
Both, neither. I don't know. I'm just chilling tonight. It's no big deal. No, but I love getting on this call with you guys. You guys have so much knowledge, but what I always go back to is I think a lot of it is just going to be the luck of the draw. And I think that I always tell my husband, I'm like, I'm not good enough to win a poker tournament. Like, I'm really not good enough, but I think that I could like accidentally win, And so I kind of feel the same way about this contest. Like, I'll do a little bit of my research. I have my new metric that I go by. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be some lucky stuff that happens.
Well, that's
Rachel,
basically how Josh's entire poker career is.
So,
Yes,
so Rach,
literally. So
Rach,
that's where I get it from, I guess.
Rach, before I clicked the button on the 49ers in the Grandissimo, it was in the back of my mind that Rattler sucks
Yes.
big.
Way more
Yeah.
D.
Yeah, way more than Kyler Murray. So
Yes.
I hope both Rattler and
But
Kyler
you didn't
Murray.
ask her. You didn't ask her who sucked more, Rattler or Mac Jones.
Well, we're
That's
gonna find out.
Rachel, what I'm hearing is if the 49ers win this week and they end up winning Grandissimo with that entry, you deserve a tip because Mike just said on the record, on video, that you helped him with that pick.
Good. I'm glad. That's why I'm still surprised that some of you guys went with Arizona this week. Like, I really think last week was the only week you could have used those guys. I think, I don't know. Good luck. I don't want my husband to lose either, but
You don't
Rachel,
care
thank
that
you
much.
so
I think you
for
like to give
joining
him a
us.
hard
You were
time.
awesome once again.
sorry, I missed that. Cut out.
I just said thanks so much for joining us. You were awesome once again.
Thank
We
you
look forward
for
to having you
having
back
me.
on again.
Yes, for sure. Have a good night, guys.
You as well.
I
think we have
now
Paulie.
see Mr. Paulie Howard has joined the call. Paul, how are you?
All right, everyone. How you doing?
Welcome to the show, Paul. I know that you're a big Shawshank Redemption fan, so I'm going to ask you this question this way, buddy.
Yes.
Andy Dufresne says, remember, Red, hope is a good thing. Maybe the best of things. No good things ever die. So which NFL team gives you the most hope in Circus Survivor this week, brother?
Well, I went a couple Ravens. I went a couple Arizona, one Dallas, and one Rams. I was surprised that Arizona led the way. It's hard to trust Kyler Murray. I agree with Josh's wife that Arizona would have been a great spot last week. I'm baffled by the 434 on the Bills. With the Dolphins at home next week laying double digits and then hosting the Saints the week after that. But I'm also shocked by 29 teams used and also 19 no picks again. I thought the Ravens were going to lead the way. I thought Arizona would have been 2, and then Dallas, and then Detroit. I am surprised by how many people, 16-22, used the Rams on the road. That I found that a little bit surprising. What say you?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Who do you think is the most likely to lose of these big favorites, Paulie?
Boy, Bryce Young 1-13 straight up on the road. I think it would be the Dallas Cowboys going down. I think it would be maybe Neighbors catches a couple bombs. Dallas defense has some issues. Dak turns it over. Everyone knows about Dallas beating them 13 in a row. Dak beating them 13 in a row. I would say if one team goes down, there was Giants money the last couple of days. I would say the Giants taking out the Cowboys if there's an upset.
Yeah, good point. Deron Bland, the Cowboys' best cornerback, is going to be out going up against Malik Neighbors. The Giants have a couple injuries as well. Thought it was interesting that Andrew Thomas is going to be out again. Their big left tackle.
Yep.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. Paulie, while you're on the show here, I got to ask you about the holiday slate because it's such a huge wrinkle with this Circus Survivor contest. Where is your mind at right now with the Thanksgiving and Christmas games?
Well, it's hard. Certainly an injury changes everything, but I'm looking at Kansas City there. For a couple slots and also using the Eagles on Black Friday against the Bears. I did use 2 Philadelphia against Dallas, but saved Philadelphia on the rest of them. So I would be looking at Philly, number 1, Kansas City, number 2. I know you have Baltimore at home there as well, but that's a tough game. And then I can't even look at Christmas yet, get that far back. But for Thanksgiving, I'd go Philly 1 on Black Friday, and then Kansas City number 2.
Paulie, what do you think?
Go ahead,
What do you think? Oh, I was going to ask Paulie, what do you think about the Grandissimo and how the picks were distributed there? What would you have done if you had one pick in Grandissimo? How would you have approached it?
I would have gone Baltimore. I'm shocked by, again, how many teams were used. $100,000 on Mac Jones. How about that? With the
That's
49ers. There was a Charger.
Yeah.
There was a Pittsburgh. There was a Buffalo, which I just talked about. They got Miami and New Orleans the next 2 home games. 6 on the Rams, 7 on the Lions. I would have gone Baltimore, and they were used by 37% of the people. But I'm shocked by this contest as well. Would have played Baltimore. Can't believe all the teams selected. This is going to be fascinating with this contest as well. That 9 teams were used in Grandissimo.
Paul, you're on the call with the guys that took the 49ers, by the way, if you didn't know.
No way. Who was it?
Us.
Oh my God! You gotta be kidding. What do you think? What'd you do? Walk me through this. What's the thinking here?
A few bottles of tequila, I guess. So Derek Stevens on the VSiN Reveal show, he also didn't like the pick.
He liked it less than you, apparently. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, look, I mean, we discussed it a lot. It was, Mike happened to like it, and I thought he was crazy at first, but neither one of us roll over to the other, right? We always make each other defend the picks, and we go game them all out. So I own it just as much as he does, for sure. And the logic here is that, put it this way, let's say that Purdy was healthy.
Yeah.
There's no way, and that Kittle was healthy. There's no way in the world there's only one pick on the 49ers. This is impossible, right?
Yeah.
Because people are going to want to save the Ravens, right? And the Cardinals, we already know the iffiness there. And so it's going to be a rare, probably, and David, you're right, they do have some other spots coming, but there's going to be a rare chance, and there's a reason. They've got their starting quarterback hurt, right? But they've got a very good defense. Their offense probably doesn't need to produce that much to win this game. And Mac Jones, there are games he looked decent. I mean, he never looked like Mahomes, right? But I mean, he's a very legitimate backup in the league, and he's got it. It's a decent spot for them, and they should win. Like David, you said, you wouldn't pull the trigger on them, but you do think they should win. All the favorites should win. And the reality is I look up and say, I don't know, like I have a shot here where we are literally the only people on them. We're on an island. The probability, of course, the Ravens, the Cardinals, and the Cowboys all lose aren't that high, but it's still, not zero. Like you could have, I didn't run the numbers, maybe it's 4% or something like that, right? And, you combine that with a 49ers win. Like if we took the 49ers and you told me 7 people are on them or 6 people are on them, I'd say this was a complete disaster. Complete disaster. I mean, the reason we're doing it is because we've got a spot where we think they should win, and we've got just a lot of extra equity by virtue of the fact that just nobody else is there. We set the over, including us. It was sort of like, 2.5. Maybe somebody else takes them, but I don't think 2 other people are taking them. Right. And so that was comforting.
Yeah. Fascinating. Great breakdown.
Now, if we lose, none of it matters. You lose. They're dead.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the theory going in.
Yeah. I tell you what I find fascinating here is that Shanahan wanted Mac Jones when they moved up in the draft. And then he got talked out of it and took Trey Lance. So this is awesome that he can stick it to the front office and say, this is the guy I wanted. I hated Trey Lance, never wanted him. And now Mac Jones can come in, save the day for the next month, and Shanahan looked like a genius.
And I'm not going to tell you I think Matt Jones is some superstar quarterback, but meanwhile, he didn't really have much coaching in New England either. And remember, Brock Purdy wasn't, he was like, Mr. Irrelevant, basically, right? He was not considered much. And he stepped in as like the 3rd string quarterback, I think, when he stepped in. The guy ends up like, going to a Super Bowl. So Shanahan is very good with quarterbacks. Now, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. But like you said, he did like Mac Jones initially. And, we are hoping to get a good game out of him. My concern overall is that I just don't know how physical, it's still early, how physical their game was last week. And it just in general, if that's going to come back to bite him on the road. That's sort of my bigger global concern.
Yeah.
I think he's going to play to slow the game down, try to play a low scoring game, and they don't have to put up many points to win. So that's the theory.
Yeah, at the end, we're either going to be geniuses or buffoons. We also have our second selection on the Lions, which I feel is in a good spot right here. And so we wanted to undercut this pool. We felt like we had a pretty good grasp of where everybody was going to land. And there is a chance this thing gets whacked pretty good this week.
Paulie, let me ask you this. Coming into the season, I think the Saints were probably that team that everybody was saying you're going to want to fade most weeks.
Yeah.
Titans were in that conversation. Saints and Titans both were feistier than a lot of people thought week 1. The Dolphins were absolutely terrible. Who would you pick right now if there's that one team in the NFL that you think is the worst team that you might want to pick on week in and week out?
I said it all summer, Saints. Rattlers never won a game. I bet them fewest wins, win total under, fewest points scored. All of it. I just think it's their salary cap hell, bad roster. And I know they hung in there, but that was more, I think, Arizona didn't put them away, and Murray woke up with the flu. So I think it's going to be the Saints, the worst team in the league. And I think I actually like Miami tomorrow. I think they beat the Patriots. They've covered 9 in a row against New England. I don't know about this players only meeting after week 1 to find out if we're on the same page. What the hell is that? But I still think the Saints the worst team in the league, and that's the way. But again, it's a ballsy pick. I hope you win. God bless you, and you will look like geniuses if you get it done. I full marks for that selection and your reasoning if that comes in.
Absolutely. Good call. Paulie, any other thoughts here before we let you go in terms of Survivor tomorrow?
Well, I think we're going to see some upsets. I don't know if it's going to be, if the Rams are going to go down. I know with the issues about their offensive line, certainly the Callahan and company didn't give Cam Ward a lot of help. He took some bad sacks. That'll be an interesting game. 355 people on Minnesota. Now that they're dealing with a ton of injuries, they could go down. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills get knocked out. I mean, you give up all those rushing yards to Baltimore, and the Jets ran for 200 yards against the Steelers' defense. I don't think the Bills are going to get any stops. I wouldn't be surprised if people on Buffalo are sweating it out tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good call. J.J. McCarthy's wife just had a baby, too. So maybe he's had a couple sleepless nights before this Vikings game, too. We'll see. But thank you so much for joining us, Paulie. We really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, guys. Good luck. Take care.
Take care.
Good luck, Paulie.
Absolutely. Is James ready for our marketplace review?
Should be. Yeah, it says he's in here in the call with us. James, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All
hey,
right.
guys, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what can you tell us about what the marketplace looks like this week? Last week, I loved your review of where things stood. Weird week, not a lot of people eliminated. So what's it look like?
Yeah, it was a weird week. I mean, there's only 3% of the pool, obviously, that was eliminated. So, most people were selling, small minority shares, just a couple of percentage points here and there. There was people buying in, just looking for a sweat, buying into different entries. There was only one entry that sold pick control this past week. One entry that sold 80% of their entry after week 1. The interesting thing, we saw, obviously last week was all 32 NFL teams that were taken. We saw some players that were playing. We had one client who had purchased 20 Survivor entries, him and his wife, 10 each, had purchased 20, and he had 16 different teams selected amongst his 20 entries. And it was an interesting strategy. His strategy from day one has been buy him to sell him. And it was an interesting strategy. He was hoping for some carnage and that he was going to be holding some lucky entries. Didn't happen week 1, so we'll see how week 2 goes for him.
Fascinating. Hey, are there any Grandissimos in the marketplace right now, or is it a little too early for that?
Yeah, still a little too early for that. There hasn't been any blood in the Grandissimo. So, once I think there's some blood in the Grandissimo, we'll see some shares potentially go up for sale. There were shares sold in both ODB's entry and obviously the Survivor Sweat podcast host, Mike and Russ. There were shares sold before the season. Nothing after week 1, though.
Gotcha. Very good. Any other thoughts on the marketplace, James? Anything we should know about?
No, I mean, it's going to be, once there's more eliminations, we see the activity is obviously correlated to the quantity of eliminations. So, seeing how this week's go, I mean, I hear you guys talking about, everyone's predicting, anywhere between Rachel's 25% up to 38% for ODB. If that holds true, I mean, next week is going to be a very busy week in the marketplace. Like we talked about last week, the entries at this point sell for a premium. We saw last week, even for the ones that were the minority shares, they were selling at about 2.5 to 3 times the EV. So they were selling, 2,500 to around 3,000 roughly EV. So it will be interesting to see how that correlates next week if there is a lot of eliminations.
Let me ask you a question, James. I know I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but tell everyone you can actually see what the entries have left or what the teams that they've used before purchasing, right? So I would suggest if you're going on and buying, especially if Baltimore makes it through this week, you're going to have the Baltimore entries are probably going to be worth a little less in what I would anticipate they're worth versus somebody who maybe got through using Jacksonville and Arizona, or some of these other fringe teams, Jacksonville and Pittsburgh, or things like that. So just go ahead and speak to that. And then also just a suggestion for people out there watching, do make sure that you go on there and you're getting the best entry possible, because you do want, especially if you're taking control of it, you do want to be able to have the best teams available. And that's the great thing about Survivor Sweat, is you're not necessarily locked into having entries that have like bad picks gone.
Right. That burned Philly and Baltimore or something.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it does. Before you purchase, it shows the teams that entry has used. The only piece of information it doesn't show is the team name. But you can see what entries they have used, who they have left. It does show that in the marketplace. And then once you do go buy it, then obviously there's a contract between the parties. And at that stage, you would, you would at that point know, what the entry is that you're purchasing. So yeah, but a great point. You definitely want to take a look at, who are the teams they've used? What is it worth? People will list them in the marketplace. It works just like eBay. People can come in and can make offers. They can do buy it now. But the value of those entries, people price them at what they think they're worth, and it's up to the seller to decide whether they agree, or the buyer to decide whether they agree.
James, we talked last week about how there were entries in the marketplace before week 1, which kind of blew my mind. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people. I'm not looking for an exact number from you because I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give us a sense of, was it like a couple entries that sold, or was it a large handful, double digits? Like, how many people are actually making transactions before week 1?
No, it's triple digits. It was
wow.
Yeah, it was
wow.
a decent number of entries that were sold before the season. Yep.
Triple digits.
And like I say, people buy these. People are looking at them as investment. Like I mentioned, the player that bought 20, him and his wife purchased 20 for the sole purpose to sell. I mean, he flat out said, "I have no intentions of winning this contest." And listen, last week I can say, I mean, the demand for the entries with pick control was very high. We had countless customers reach out to us asking us, "Are there any entries available that I could take control of?" And there just wasn't. No one was willing at this stage to sell the controlling interest of their entry. And that's why when I mentioned there's only one that sold, there was only one that was listed. Most of the ones that were on the marketplace were just the minority shares. So if there's upsets this week, we'll see next week how many people are willing to give up control at that point to monetize their entry. But I can say,
for people who are new to the marketplace. Okay.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think I had said this before. When people do get eliminated, there is people trying to look to get back in. Last year, one of the 8 winning entries, I told this before, was purchased in our marketplace at the end of week 3, going into week 4. It was very early in the contest. Someone was eliminated early in the contest. They went in, they purchased pick control, majority control of an entry after week 3, going into week 4.
I think you also had a few. I think you also had a few people that made it to the final week that had purchased, if I remember right, that had purchased their way in and then hedged at the end. So they didn't actually win, but they did make money.
Oh yeah, at the end. I mean, all those entries of the 17 entries that went into last weekend. I mean, there was shares. I mean, I think almost probably a dozen of the 17 had sold shares in the marketplace at some point throughout the season. So when you're down at Circa that last week, you see all these people, sweating it. Obviously there's the original owner, and then there's all the investors that are riding along with the sweat, and that, can hedge in and out and whatever. So.
And it is more fun that way. I know I say that all the time in the pod, but you're doing this yourself. It is what it is. But like when you have the partners like David, it can be a pain in the ass when you can't get the pick you want in there. But it's still fun to to do it with friends and colleagues. It's more fun than locking yourself in a room and spitting out a pick.
I just wanted to add, for people that don't know, with the marketplace, the seller, correct me if I'm wrong, James, they're the ones determining whether pick control is given up or not, right? So if you want to sell, you could sell 50% and choose to keep pick control. Or you could say, you know what, I want someone else to decide, and I just want to be along for the ride. But correct me if I'm wrong, if you're giving away control, you should probably expect a little bit of a premium on that.
Absolutely. Well, at this stage, for sure. Like I said, there was only one person that was willing to do it last week. At this stage, there's just not a lot of people willing to bow out to sell pick control. It does sell at much more of a premium if you are willing to give up that pick control. But the seller does decide in the listing. You'll see whether you're acquiring pick control or whether you're not. The vast majority, if you see like minority shares, obviously it's not. But like you mentioned, it could be you're buying 50%, and it could still just be a minority 50%. The person keeping pick control, but they decide that.
Gotcha. Good stuff there, James. Thank you so much for coming on. We look forward to this market report next week after maybe a little carnage.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Thanks, James.
All right. Take care. Awesome. Awesome. Great to have James on the show. Great to get that market report. And as I tell people, even if you're not interested in selling or buying the next week or the next couple weeks, you should still keep an eye on the marketplace. It's like, even if you're not in the market to buy a home, it's still good to know what the market is like, so that when you are ready to buy a home, you're kind of more informed and you're able to kind of make a better decision there. Fellas, we're getting toward the end here. Give me some takeaways from this show for you guys. What have you learned? What have you taken away besides the fact that there was tequila involved in this 49ers Grandissimo decision?
I think we should list our 49ers pick for 300,000 on the marketplace before kickoff. And we'll take 280, but shh, don't tell him.
Truth be told, I was stone sober, didn't have a drop of
That is true.
alcohol. Prior
For the
to
record, let the record show.
Yeah, I mean, you do all the work until you push the button. When you push the button, there's that sense of it's out of your hands. Can't play anymore, can't coach, can't do all that. The work has been done. Honestly, to me and my partner, all about the process. I was extremely happy that there was only one person on the Niners, and I was disappointed that there were 7 on the Lions. I was hoping for 4 to 5.
4 or 5.
That's where I was landing. So for us, yes, they're going to play the games, kick off tomorrow, but the game was played in the last 2 to 3 days, to be honest. And now it's out of our hands, and we're super excited. And hey, like I said, we could look like geniuses, we could be like buffoons, whatever. But it was a process. We got there, we landed on it, we own it, and here we are. So, I wish everybody the best of luck. And I know Baker did a really good job of the percentages with Baltimore, and so again, I'm sure he'll tell you too. It's the process and where you find your landing spots, how you come underneath and go over the top of the percentages of the pool, whether it's 18,000 and in Grandissimo 69. So, hey, I'm happy with where we're at, and we go from there.
David, what say you? What's your biggest takeaway here?
Well, I think that just the great thing is just listening to different people and their different philosophies on it. And I think that's the great thing about Survivor. And we all don't have the same motivations and goals. So what might be right for you might not be right for me. And what might be right for me might not be right for Mike and Russ. And you have to think about your risk tolerance. Are you looking for a sweat for the long term? Are you looking to maximize each EV for the week? Are you looking to maximize it for the short term so that you could sell for the long term? And we all just have like different ways that we look at it. Paulie can't believe that somebody could come in on the Niners, but then Russ and Mike are probably saying they're, even though despite the fact that they have the Cardinals, but let's just put that aside, can't believe that people would pick the Cardinal, or they couldn't believe people picked the Ravens, because why would you pick the Ravens in this chalk spot? Everybody has their own risk tolerance, and we all look at football just a little bit different. And Rachel has her process, which works for her, and it's worked so far, and it's great. And Paulie has his, and Mike has his, and I have mine. So I think the wonderful thing about this contest is, for me personally, there's 2 different contests. The first one is everything that's played up until 4 o'clock on Saturday. And that is me trying to get into the minds of 18,000 people and 69 people for the Grandissimo. And obviously it's not individuals because it's entries, but just kind of really trying to dissect and so once I make that determination, how do I want to play it? But then there's also the football side of it. Even though I feel certain ways about the percentages, at the end of the day, I'm still going to have my football biases. Some people will only look at the raw data of win equity, and they'll use those to determine their processes. Me personally, I think that Pittsburgh has a better chance of winning the football game than I do think that the
Rams
Dallas,
or whatever, sure,
or the Rams or something like that.
Yep.
So even though it's a 160 in the marketplace, and if you stick it into an EV calculator, you might come out that Pittsburgh's a bad pick. For me personally, I look at football in a certain way. And so that's the great thing. If you want to plug the numbers in the calculator, there are so many calculators out there that you can project and you can kind of figure out the equity. or you could do it like I do it, and you can just strictly go based on football feel, and everybody has their own way of doing it. So you find yours and you find your comfort. And if you're comfortable in going contrarian and trying to maximize your EV for that week, then you by all means, go ahead and do it. But if you want to take the team that's most likely to win and you want to try to survive for a little bit longer, maybe monetize it on Survivor Sweat, then you do that too. But at the end of the day, just own your decision and be happy with it. And yeah, I'm excited for this show because I love the forecasting part of the game. And I think that's one of the things that have kind of brought Russ and Mike and I together, is that we like that part of the game. And yeah, watching it and hoping that we made the right decisions and that our football acumen comes into play. But it really comes down to this show today is about the other process of the game. And so that's the fun thing to me. And that's why I'm excited about this show, because I know that we're not alone. Anytime I post anything percentage wise, I get more replies than anything. So I know that people love it and there's an appetite for it. So please continue to watch the show and tell your friends about it, because the way that we can make this happen and make this show grow is for you guys out there to help promote it.
Yeah, hit that like button if you guys are watching on YouTube or Twitter or whatever it may be. Russ, I got a question for you before we go here. I know you guys got cute last week. You went contrarian with the Rams. It worked out for y'all. I think I heard that you guys have a couple entry on the Vikings. Is the Vikings your most, I guess we'll call it contrarian pick or lowest owned pick this week, or do you have a couple others that are really low, 1%, et cetera?
Well, I mean, we have San Francisco, right? So that's got to be, pretty low down the list. And we have San Francisco in the main pool as well, for a decent. Yeah, I mean, we like David said, we don't try not to do a lot of spray and pray, but we do a little bit when we still have a lot of picks. And I debate this as well too. Mike has said in years past, I almost hate having so many picks because I feel like we then put a couple here and a couple there and in spots and we just sort of waste them. But they're sort of wasted, but there will come a time in the NFL where there are, 6 upsets in a day, right? And then you may have one of these obscure teams that's still sitting there. Or the opposite, where we have 1 or 2, 5% or something on a chalk team, and maybe they're the only team that wins. I'm still not sure if that's right or wrong, to be clear. But what we are trying to do is make sure we know whether we're, or at least intentionally, trying to be substantially over what we think the field is going to be or substantially under, which is, like I said, why I'm annoyed with the Cardinals, because we're kind of at par, and that's kind of just useless, at least with respect to that pool. But yeah, the Vikings, but really it's San Francisco because we have more volume on them in general. So that's kind of the pick that really needs to win for us. And also towards just all of this.
It's going to be a fascinating day of football tomorrow.
Oh, it always is. But towards like what David said.
It's going to be a fascinating day of football tomorrow.
Yep. But what David said about, there are 2 levels of contest, or 3 really. You've got, you do all the numbers, and then you do, the football stuff. And then you watch the games, right? But a lot of times it's inevitable. You base whether or not you made a good or bad decision on the outcome of the game. But really, I mean, every NFL team can win. Like New Orleans probably wins a game this year. I mean, they could go, over, but they probably won't. They'll probably win a game or 2. And so you really don't know when you're going to step in it. Any NFL team, any given Sunday, right? So just because San Francisco wins, San Francisco loses, it doesn't mean our pick was right or wrong. It just is what it is. You have to, and the sample size is so small on these things. It's so difficult to know if you're right or wrong just based on an outcome.
Absolutely. Just to put a bow on this thing, guys, tomorrow the Cardinals, the #1 selection, is in the late slot, but a lot of these games with survivor implications are in the early slot. So it's going to once again be a very intense early window. So best of luck to everybody out there, and we'll see you next week on Saturday night.
The whole field loses. We can hedge the Cardinals at the end. We can know what we're playing for. Hedge.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Hedge San Francisco at the end. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Take care, everyone.